All right. Hey, good Wednesday morning to you. And hope everything's good in your world. Hope you had a great night. I spent, I think, the night studying the book of Joshua. And we're in that on Sunday mornings and just kind of getting prep work done. But it was a great night. I love doing that. And then, man, I've been up early this morning, just enjoying time studying Luke and getting things ready for this morning. Uh, so it's good. It's just a good day. Looking forward to what goes on today, and then we'll see what develops tomorrow. Tomorrow we're heading out. We're going to Amsterdam tomorrow. Tammy and I are for a short trip, but should be fun. Can't wait. Looking forward to that. So hey, enough of that though. Let's just jump into the book of John, and we are in chapter 1. Book of Luke. Sorry, chapter 1. I got John on my brain because that's what we're talking about. John the Baptist. Luke chapter 1. We're gonna be in verse 57, but I want to talk a little bit to get us there and just kind of remind us of the things that are taking place. This is one of the longest chapters really in the New Testament, and we've got tomorrow we'll finish up chapter 1. We'll flip to chapter 2, which is the famous Luke 2. It's the story of the birth of Jesus, and so we're off to the races at that point. But I love the preliminary setup that Luke does. So you remember Luke said that he studied all the other gospels that were written and then began to interview eyewitnesses as to the events that took place. And so meticulously, moved by the Spirit, he collects all of this data and then begins to write it out. And so I love how he does it and what he's doing. And so he's giving us solid background. And the thing that screams out at you as you look at this is the sheer sovereignty of God about bringing about a plan. How he is true to his word, and what he says will happen, and you see it unfold here. And while it may not surprise us as Christ followers, it should really astonish us at the preciseness of what takes place. And so I've titled the message today, "His Name is John," and that's kind of the skinny on what's taking place. And so let me just kind of bring you up to speed. It has been 400 silent years, 430 silent years for the last time that the nation of Israel has really heard from God. No prophet, no miracles, no angels. Malachi gave the last word, and some of the last word of Malachi did in fact speak of John the Baptist, which is where we're looking at now. It has been 500 years since any angel is mentioned in the scriptures. And that was from the prophet Zechariah, which is interesting. But he records that Gabriel's last recorded sighting, he's only shown up 4 times in the scriptures. Once in Daniel's vision, second when he answered Daniel's prayer. The third visit was to Zechariah, and the fourth visit was to Mary. And so this is it. And so whatever his business is, standing in the presence of God, and whatever battle and warrior type stuff that he's doing, it's been 522 years of silence. No one's heard of Gabriel, seen Gabriel. The last person to see him was Daniel, and that was 522 years before that. So when you think about that, and an angel shows up, it should be quite frightening. It's not like, I think we tend to think, oh man, yeah, the angels came and went all through the Old Testament, New Testament. They're just always, dashing and darting around. Well, there weren't a lot of sightings of that. And so I think it's important that we see this and understand this, and Gabriel himself was that way. So John was prophesied about 700 years before this event that we're going to look at today. 700. That's like 1323. That was John Wycliffe was kind of roaming the world at that point. That's how it would be, like John Wycliffe speaking about something that was happening in our day. And but Isaiah recorded this, his prophecy. He says, "The voice of one calling out." That's Isaiah 40, 3-5, those of you who take notes. "The voice of one calling out, clear the way for the Lord in the wilderness. Make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Let every valley be lifted up, and every mountain and hill be made low, and let the uneven ground become plain, and the rugged terrain a broad valley. Then the glory of the Lord will be revealed, and all flesh will see it together, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken. That's Isaiah saying there's going to come a time when a forerunner, someone who's going to prepare the way in the wilderness for the Son of Man is coming, and he will reveal, and the glory of the Lord will be revealed, right? And all flesh will see it together. He's speaking of this event that they're talking about here, and then 430 years before that, Malachi writes, and Malachi says this in Malachi 3:1, "Behold, I am sending my messenger." Now that's John, "and he will clear a way before me." Right? So there's going to be a messenger. He's going to clear the way for who? Me, God, me, who? Jesus in the flesh. "And the Lord whom you are seeking will suddenly come to his temple." You should expect a messenger. He's going to prepare the way, and then suddenly, the Lord, will break into the temple. "The messenger of the covenant in whom you delight. Behold, he is coming, says the Lord of armies." Then later on in that same book, he records in Malachi 4:5, "Behold, I'm going to send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and terrible day of the Lord." And so John came in the spirit of Elijah. And so we see just the sheer sovereignty of God as he unfolds, as he has been proclaiming these things down through the ages. We see the magnificence of the angels in all their glory, and the eternality of these angels. It's 700 years. Gabriel's 700 years. I don't think he shows wrinkles. I don't think they age. They're just eternal beings. And so now, what we've seen so far, the heavenly activity that we've seen so far, Zechariah is said was a certain priest. His wife Elizabeth, they had been praying for a child. Sure, they were beyond childbearing years, but they were still praying that God would give them a child. And they were old and beyond childbearing years. And an angel, Gabriel, says, "Hey, the grace of God is coming." Now, where do they say the grace of God is coming? That's the name. That's what John means, the grace of God. And so you see this kind of laid out here. And so an angel says, "Hey, the grace of God is coming." Great in God's sight. So John the Baptist, according to what we already know, is that he was going to be great in God's sight. He was going to be filled with the Holy Spirit from birth. He was going to turn many back to the Lord. And we see that as we chart John the Baptist's journey of how it felt like all of Israel was coming out into the wilderness to hear this man began to rant like a prophet. And then they're going to turn back to the Lord, and then there was a forerunner in the spirit of Elijah. This is what Gabriel told Zechariah was going to take place. Zechariah had a hard time with that, and so God judged him and muted his mouth. So he didn't speak for 9 months. Next, Gabriel visits Mary, 15-year-old little girl, and he says, "You are going to carry one who will be known as the Son of God." And so this is what took place. And so we see all of that laid out. A prophecy is given 9 months later, and then another. This is it's just constant is what's going on. Now, in verse 57, we pick up the story. Now, you remember Mary came and she visited with her, stayed with her 3 months, and so Mary went back. Now, her pregnancy is full. She's 9 months pregnant. Mary's gone back to Galilee. She's 3 months pregnant. And here's what it says happened. Now the time had come for Elizabeth to give birth. And she gave birth to a son. Her neighbors and her relatives heard that the Lord had displayed his great mercy toward her, and they were all rejoicing with her. So there's this party going on. I mean, they can't believe it, that this woman who was beyond childbearing age or bearing age, has gotten a child. Now, mean, Zechariah couldn't say, hey, let me tell you the exchange that took place. But it was obvious that she had become pregnant. So there we are. So there's this great party, and it says, and it happened, um, and her neighbors, right? There's just this great rejoicing, because who wouldn't, right? I mean, every time there's a birth, it seems like there's a great party, right? I mean, there's just this rejoicing of what's taking place, and I remember Tammy and I when Jackson was born, the son of our old age, so to speak. We weren't that old, but still, just the joy that there was, and the whole family, all of our kids, and even our friends. John, one of my friends, came and played music in the hospital, just rejoicing with us that we had a child, a son, and so it was just good, right? And that's what's going on here. There's just this great celebration that's taking place. It says, verse 69, and it happened. Now, that's kind of the introduction of a miracle. When you read something, and it happened, normally in the scriptures, you're going to find that there's going to be some God thing that happens. And it happened. That on the 8th day, they came to circumcise the child, and they were going to call him Zechariah, which means God remembers. Now, and again, just the craziness of these names. Zechariah was given that name, and it says God remembers. God remembers what? God remembers that he is going to send a forerunner, John. And so Zechariah, bearing that name, just doesn't even know what's coming until he begins to be an old man. But it says, the crowd just assumes, oh, we're gonna name him Zechariah. You can see that in several places where it seems like that the crowd kind of helps pick out the name. Now, they didn't have to wait till the 8th day to pick the name out, but custom had kind of gotten that way. And on the 8th day, there was a circumcision. The circumcision was meant to separate the nation of Israel out, to show that, hey, we are cutting off the flesh. Like, we are not going to be like the Philistines or any of the others. We're not going to live after the flesh. And so to cut the foreskin of every male was to be a sign that says, and it's the same for us. We don't circumcise today by mandate, but our hearts are circumcised, right? We cut the flesh out of our heart, that we put it to death. That's all of that means. Reckon yourselves dead to sin. So circumcision of the heart is what God was really after. But the circumcision that happened physically in the Old Testament was a very clear and vivid reminder that you aren't like the rest, that you're going to cut off the flesh, so to speak. You're going to be done with living that. You're going to live life based on God and his relationship with you. And so it's a powerful visual. And so it was the custom and the command that you would go take your male on the 8th day of his birth, and you would take him to the temple, and you would circumcise him there. And so this is what happened. And it happened that on the 8th day they came to circumcise the child, and they were going to call him Zechariah after his father, which means God remembers. And yet his mother, Elizabeth, goes, no, indeed. But he shall be called John. No, we're calling him John. And they're like, John? Verse 61. And they said to her, there's no one among your relatives who's called by that name. Where does that name come from? And they made signs to his father, thinking, well, we'll get John on our side. And so they're making signs, and which is kind of interesting to me because he was only muted. We don't know anything about him being deaf, but it was almost like they're they're treating him as though he's just can't hear or speak. But it says, and they made signs to his father as to what he wanted him called. And he asked for a tablet and wrote as follows. His name is John. What does John mean? The grace of God. That's what John means. He is the grace of God. He is the forerunner. He is the beginning. He is preparing the way. He is setting up a highway so that grace flows constantly through the Redeemer, right? So that now you and I are lavished in grace. Well, who made that highway of grace? God did, by giving us a man named John the Baptist who prepared the way for the nation of Israel. So he paved the road, so to speak, for grace to take place. And so that's why his name means God is gracious. And so verse 62, and they made signs, and he asked for a tablet, and he wrote as follows. His name is John. And they were all amazed, right? So he's writing it out. No, they're like, seriously? All right. And then verse 64, and at once his mouth was opened and his tongue freed, and he began to speak praise to God. So his mouth is immediately unlocked, and it so happened, and then that's how it's kind of phrased, and then at once there's that bam, it just happens, right? And then what does he first begin to do when God frees his tongue? Praises God. He just begins to. I mean, it's a celebration, man. He is so blown away that God is faithful to do what he said he did, and that he has remembered him, right? God remembers that Zechariah had wanted a son, and God remembered that. So it's powerful what takes place. And then we come down here and he says this, and fear came on all who lived around them, right? So, I mean, man, the entire hill country of Judea, which is the Gaza Strip, if you will, today. It just sits east of Jerusalem. It's right even with the Dead Sea. You'll see the mountain range if you look at maps and pictures and all that. The whole hill country of Judea begins to hear this matter. That's what it says. And fear came on, verse 65, and fear came on all those who lived around them. And all these matters were being talked about in the entire hill country of Judea. Man, so, I mean, they love and telling this story. Man, there was the old lady, Zechariah, Elizabeth and Zechariah. The angel came, spoke to him, said they were going to have a son. It was crazy. Zechariah didn't believe. He couldn't talk for 9 months. It was insane. And then we were there for the circumcision. And when we were going to celebrate, we were going to name Zechariah, and they're like, no. And John writes on a tablet, and then when he was done, he spoke, and it was crazy what took place. And so everybody's repeating this story all through the valley. And so even before John the Baptist was able to walk, there was something famous and unusual about him. And so, and I'm sure Zechariah, once his tongue was freed, said, no, let me tell you the rest of the story. He said he's the forerunner for the Messiah. So now there's a buzz that's happening. I mean, it's going about everywhere. And then it says this, verse 66, all who heard them kept them in mind, saying, what then will this child, such a special birth, what's he going to turn out to be? I mean, who is this, right? And so you just see this. It's just amazing to me just to hear and put myself in this situation. It says, for indeed, the hand of the Lord was on him. They could see it from the beginning. Man, God's hand was on all over him. And so we gleaned a couple of things here, as we look at this story. Because, narratives are different. We just understand the story, and then we try to say, what are we learning from this story? What do we derive? And each of us can make different observations about it. But for me, it's the fact that God is faithful. When God said something 700 years before that, it's not like he gets old and he forgets it. You and I have to jot things down to remember, right? And then we have pictures that remind us of certain things. But here, God is just faithful. He said he was going to do it, and he did it. What that should do is unlock in your mind and my mind that when we see the promises of God written in the scriptures for you and for me, you can take that thing to the bank because God is faithful. His word is truth. If he says it, if God speaks it in this book, in the book that we have collected of these writings and these manuscripts that have been put into our language, bound together, or however your form you're getting it, when you read that word, know that it's truth. Listen, the whole world doesn't know anything about truth. The whole world's gone crazy and psycho. And truth is relative to them. And so we can nothing matters in that sense. There is no truth in our world today. But you know where you can find it? Within the pages of the Word of God. That's truth. That's why when this world gets crazy, hey, turn off your news and shut your laptop and turn your phone off. Open up the good book, and you're going to find truth. You want to know where truth is? It's found there. And the last principle that I've learned and I find is that life is not random. God has appointed the exact times and places in which we would live. Your life's not random. God destined you to be born at this time on this planet and in the area in which you find yourself. And so life's not random, and life for you and me as believers. We have good works that God's prepared. Just like He prepared some great works for John, He's prepared good works for you and I that we should walk in them. Life's not random. I have a purpose in being here. I was born at this exact time. So were you. Live like it. Man, Lord bless you guys. Can't wait to share more with you in the morning as we listen to Zechariah's song. Lord bless you. Have a great one.